Hello everyone, and welcome to or back to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about the release of the Elder Scrolls Castles, and whether or not it's worth your time giving it a shot. Now I'm going to go into more details about the things that I like about the game and the things that I don't like about the game, but in short, if you're thinking about giving this game a try, you might as well. Especially if you tried and enjoyed Fallout Shelter, you're probably going to like this game as well. On the flip side, if you've tried and did not enjoy or care for Fallout Shelter, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to like this game either, because you probably don't like this kind of simulator game. And that's fine, the game is definitely not for everyone. If, however, you're a fan of these kinds of games, if you played and enjoyed Fallout Shelter, or you like these kinds of phone sim games, and you're a fan of the Elder Scrolls universe, and you'd like to see how those two mix together, then I would definitely encourage giving this game a shot. Before I get into some of my own thoughts, I want to address two of the biggest criticisms I've seen about this game online. The first is the game's art style. To some extent, this criticism is subjective as to whether or not you like the art style, but I will admit that some of the character models, in fact, pretty much all of the human character models, leave some to be desired. That being said, I actually think that the beast races, the Argonians and the Khajiit, have a pretty cool art style, and I like the way that they look within the game. Personally, I don't actually have that much of a problem with most of the aspects of the art style. The castles themselves, the various rooms, I think those look fine enough. My biggest problem is actually with the art style design of the weapons and the armor. The weapons are not as bad, but there's basically only 3 different armor designs: 1 heavy armor, 1 light armor, and 1 mage armor, and as you get higher levels of them, they just change in color. That's the only real difference. Other than that, iron armor is identical to orichalcum armor, is identical to moonstone armor. The only thing that actually changes is the stats and the color. They're the exact same designs. This isn't as big of a deal for the weapons, at least, because the weapons are smaller, and I somewhat can understand how they all look fairly the same with a wooden handle, except the metal on the top of it is different. But when it comes to the armor all looking the same, I think that's a lot more of a glaring issue, and it's something that I hope they do change in the future. I hope that they do change orichalcum armor, for example, to look more orcish. Another major issue related to character design is actually that a lot of the unique characters that you can unlock through the game don't have distinct character models. In fact, none of them do. For example, this is supposed to be the character design for Lydia. You know, probably Skyrim's most famous follower that everybody knows more or less what she looks like. The generic character designs for generic characters is one thing, but if you have a unique character that actually is meant to be somebody from the Elder Scrolls universe, they need to look like that character, at least to the best you can. You know, like changing the hair color. This is especially true because a lot of these unique characters require you to spend actual money either on the battle pass or on individual characters in the shop, which leads into the next problem with the game: the predatory marketing aspects of getting you to buy things in a free-to-play game. Now, I'm going to be real with you. Does this game have that? Absolutely. Is it any worse than any other mobile game? Not really. Like most mobile games, including Fallout Shelter, the game starts off giving you lots of free stuff, lots of packs, which are the equivalent of like lunch boxes in Fallout Shelter in this game, that you can open and get loot and characters. They give you a couple of free legendary characters at the beginning of the game. Like Ulfric Stormcloak, I'm pretty sure is given to anybody who starts playing the game now. But slowly, over time, the game takes away those plentiful rewards and tries to slowly encourage you into spending real money to get those kinds of things still. Look, if you come into the game knowing that that's gonna happen, and you are strong-willed enough to not waste your money on the game, then you can still play the game just fine without spending any money. I haven't spent a single cent on the game. I've been playing it on and off over the past week, and I've, for the most part, enjoyed my time. Free-to-play mobile games are always going to dangle things in front of your face like a carrot and a stick and try and get you to spend money on them. It's somewhat unfortunate, but the reality of it is companies keep doing it because people keep spending money on the microtransactions. While I would recommend giving this game a shot, I would not recommend going straight ahead, opening your wallet, and starting to spend any of your actual money on microtransactions in this game. From what I can tell by looking at the store and having played the game as much as I have so far, there's not really much that you can get from the store that you can't get by just playing the game. Especially since they don't have a lot of unique character or weapon models that will at least add some extra flavor to the game. The only thing you can actually get is gear with slightly better stats, but you can get that by just playing the game, and since none of them even look unique, there's not that much of a reason to buy them. So if you do end up giving the game a shot, don't buy the Battle Pass right out, and don't buy anything from the shop unless you're really sure that that's something you want. But now I want to talk about the gameplay, and specifically in context of Fallout Shelter, so you can have an idea of what's similar and different about it. Overall, the concepts of building workstations and assigning people to those workstations, which they may or may not be effective at based off of their base stats and the clothing they're wearing, and in this case also the tools that they have, are all pretty much identical to how they work in Fallout Shelter. The main difference is that now they are workstations that are independent of the size of the room that they're in. So you have the ability to free build rooms to whatever size you want, and then you place the workstations down inside of them. There is also more of a greater focus on upgrading the workstations that you have rather than building multiple of them. In the early stages of Fallout Shelter, you'll already build multiple water purifier rooms, energy rooms, and food rooms, whereas in this game, it's not until fairly late on that you even get your second kitchen. In Castles, you also only have 2 traits that are continuously going down, compared to Fallout Shelter, which has 3. Water, food, and power. Castles only has 2. Food and oil, which is essentially power, because the oil controls the lamps, which allow workstations to run. However, Castles also has additional workstations that produce other materials. There's a furnace, which produces ingots to craft weapons and armor. There's a loom, which produces canvas and other materials to produce clothing. And there's a mill, which produces building materials like stone and wood. Despite these minor changes, the system works fairly similarly to how it does in Fallout Shelter. The questing system is also somewhat similar to how Fallout Shelter does it, but rather than having travel time be kind of the limiting factor between you going from one quest to the next, the limiting factor in Castles is not having enough healing potions and not being able to simply produce them like you produce stim packs in Fallout Shelter. This forces you to take time to heal your combatants after battle at the buffet table. There's also a sort of rock, paper, scissors combat system to Castles where people with battle axes are more effective against people with staves, or people with bows being more effective against people with battle axes. I think that overall, the combat aspect of questing in this game is better than it is in Fallout Shelter. There's some level of thought behind it, at least, rather than just equipping your characters with the right weapons. But at the same time, there's virtually no story aspect behind any of the quests in this game. You're just fighting nameless bandits, ghosts, and dragons, with a dragon boss at the end of each major quote-unquote quest line. And there's no real explanation as to what's going on other than, oh, there's another dragon, you've got to go fight that dragon. At least with Fallout Shelter, the quests have some sort of story behind them, and NPCs that you talk to and can even have decisions as to what you do throughout the quest. The main unique aspect of this game that doesn't have a direct equivalent in Fallout Shelter is the actual aspect of ruling your kingdom, getting to decide both who your heir is, who takes over the throne, and who will take over the throne after them, and making individual decisions that will impact the happiness of your people and impact whether or not they might assassinate you and replace you with someone else. This is definitely an interesting concept, and I think works fairly well overall, although some of the decisions are fairly inconsequential, or can fairly easily be made in a way that makes everyone happy at the cost of just a little bit of gold. But sometimes the game really will force you into a difficult decision where you're going to alienate one member or the other of your castle, and in my case, I had one member assassinate the other member. They were so upset about the decision that I made. I was then forced to banish that member who did the assassinating, and then everybody else was very unhappy as a result of the whole affair, so I had to try extra hard to bring everybody's happiness back up so they didn't depose me. When that aspect of the game is at its best, it's actually pretty entertaining. But to be fair, most of the instances that people come to you with a request, it's usually just about whether or not you should trade ingots for cloth or cloth for ingots. Another thing that I think this game does right is some of the unique dialogue between the characters. Because each of the members of your castle has unique relationships with one another, based on whether or not they could be siblings, or they could be commoner and royal, they could be people who are in love, people who are married, or somebody who's married that has an additional lover or lovers. All of those things can have impacts on how those people relate to you as the king or ruler, and also how those people relate to one another, compared to how they are in Fallout Shelter, for example, where there isn't all that much of a unique relationship between any of your dwellers. They're pretty much all just mindless worker drones that do exactly as they're told. Now, in some ways that makes sense within the Fallout setting, because they are literally lab rats for the Overseer, which is you, but still from a gameplay perspective, it's not as compelling. While the game certainly has its issues, I would say that overall I've enjoyed my time playing it so far. And I would argue that while it might not be as good as Fallout Shelter is now, this game at launch is definitely better than Fallout Shelter was at launch. I played Fallout Shelter all the way back when it first launched, and back then it didn't have quests, it didn't have a lot of the unique weapons, outfits, or characters that it has now. And if this game is able to improve as much over the years as Fallout Shelter has improved over the past few years, then I think Castles could end up being pretty good. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you tried Castles yet? And if you did, have you enjoyed it? As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and say that if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content on the channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next one.